Hey guys, this is Josh Peak. I am doing the media and the social media for OKUSA Wrestling, and with me today I have the chairman, Zachary Randall. We're going to talk about just some updates, some things going on with OKUSA. But hey, Zach, glad to have you on.
Hey, thanks, man. Good to be here.
Well, cool. Well, I want to get started first by saying we want to congratulate again Tate Piccolo and Jordan Williams for making the Who Is Number One. And that'll be down in Austin, Texas. I think that's October 3rd. What do you think about that, Zach?
Oh, I think that's awesome. That's Oklahoma wrestling. We always have guys like that are hammers, and guys behind those guys that are hammers, and that's the history of us, man. It's beautiful. Those two, I know those two kids. They're great kids, man. I'm glad to see them get to perform on a platform like that. I think that's awesome for them and also their families.
Yeah. We talked about that last week. We had Derek Fix on, and this was kind of, we wanted to talk about, get some of the RTC coaches, you, the chairman, and then some maybe college coaches and some high school coaches on this, and do regular updates as well. We do have some ranked kids as well. Almost every weight, it seems like. We have there's a USA rankings, so we wanted to mention that as well. So we have the two that made the Who Is Number One, but then we have some guys that's made the national ranking, so that's pretty cool. I think Oklahoma's in good hands right now.
Yeah, when you look at those rankings, I know there's a bunch of them. It's hard to know which one is the one. There's about 20 of them out there, but it seems like in every one of those rankings, we've got Oklahoma kids littered throughout those rankings, and that's just a good testament to our families supporting their athletes, and we have incredible coaches, incredible people in Oklahoma working together to help, that all happen. Always have. We have definitely a fraternity in Oklahoma of wrestling, so it's in our blood. So it's good to see that.
Yeah. Well, on the bottom, you can see we have our social media channels here. You can subscribe at Facebook, OKUSA Wrestling, Twitter. We have a new Twitter channel. You want to follow that. It's official OKUSA. And then our Instagram is OKUSA Wrestling. We're also on YouTube as well, official OKUSA Wrestling. So we'll be doing these quite often. This particular stream, the software we're using, will stream live, like right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We're live right now across all of those, which is pretty cool. So we want to be able to communicate and have updates across the board. So let's talk a little bit about some of the new things. What comes to my mind is the talent we have right now almost goes back to the talent. Your dad had, as well as then you look at the Cade Brock and the Dayton Fix era. We're loaded. We're at every weight. We're deep. So, do you think it goes in cycles, or do you just think that, Oklahoma's we're doing good from the parenting, coaching standpoint, from all the way around? How does that happen?
Yeah, I think when you look at, I hate to get too philosophical, but when you look at things in life and you look at life and programs, everything cycles through a season, you know what I mean? And so the same with Oklahoma wrestling. It's such a small state of wrestling in comparison to a lot of states, and so, we always have some really tough kids, and then just sometimes we have a few more. We had a really tough cycle of kids come through Oklahoma in the late 80s and early 90s, and you're seeing those kids' sons now. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of that has to do with, there's a previous cycle of really tough kids, and then, they're helping their kids, and so it just kind of goes in waves like that. And so, we're always competing for a junior national championship, a cadet national championship, schoolboy national championship. And so our teams are always competitive, and so it cycles like anything, but we do have some great coaches, some great families, great kids right now. And we're getting deeper and deeper, which is awesome. It's awesome for our kids and our families.
Yeah. You look at what the schoolboys did last year, Greco and freestyle, solid. Cadet, you were coaching that team. That was solid. And then our junior team, they win the duels. So, from 7th, 8th grade, all the way to our seniors now, it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oklahoma is such a competitive environment. I think it has a lot to do with our history. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that are watching may not even realize that USA Wrestling actually was birthed in Oklahoma. It came out of Stillwater, and then I mean, when you look at our college programs like OSU and OU and UCO and NEO and OCU and these programs that have, histories of national championships and stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty amazing. The brotherhood, the sisterhood, the fraternity of wrestling in Oklahoma is pretty deep. It's funny because when I go other places, I don't think our kids realize, kind of what they have a lot of times. I mean, it's very common for us to walk into a room and there be an Olympian or, an Olympic champion. National champions are at practice every day almost. And our kids I don't think quite understand, or even appreciate sometimes how awesome that is. Like even your sons and my sons, for example, like your son's coach. I mean, he's a national finalist, an NCAA national finalist, a 3-time All-American, coached at, University of Oklahoma. My kids go to practice and, at our high school and your high school, there are guys that were national champions, All-Americans, D1, D2. I mean, heck, our assistant coach is the retired coach from UCO, Coach James, and he's the second winningest college coach in the history of wrestling.
Yep.
And he's at our local high school. And so, when you think about that, it makes a lot of sense why our kids, are so developed. They do so good. We have really incredible history and guys, feeding that information down. I mean, and then not to mention, we have some amazing high school coaches. I mean, the coaches we have in our high schools, I think, are some of the best in the country. Always have been.
Yep.
And and then that trickles all the way down. I mean, our youth league programs are insane. In Oklahoma, we've got crazy great youth league coaches that they're grinding it out every week. And so I think that's kind of what creates. You were asking earlier, kind of what creates these waves and kind of why Oklahoma wrestling is so tough. It's not because there's so many people wrestling, but the people that are wrestling and coaching and supporting it are just so committed to it, and there's such a history there. It's a pretty cool thing to be a part of. It's definitely a humbling thing to be, working in an organization chairing that and trying to make sure and safeguard and protect that history. There's a lot of folks that, depend on our board and me to make sure that we move that forward for sure.
Well, that's something that comes to mind for me is since you're the chairman, you've been the chairman almost a year. Mm-hmm. I think we're seeing this, it kind of stinks because of COVID. We didn't get to have Fargo and whatever, but I think we're seeing our state come together probably closer than I've ever seen. The communication's great. And it's things like this we got to always be improving on and getting better, our communications on social media and keeping parents and kids updated. And so I think overall, this is probably the best I've seen Oklahoma as far from a communication standpoint, leadership standpoint. It's just going to get better. What do you see the differences between when your dad was chairman and now you're chairman? What are the differences that you see now or between the two times?
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, my dad was a state chairman for, I don't even know, like 20 years. And he worked really close with USA Wrestling. He was the state chairman's chair. So he was the chair of all the state chairmans and all their executive boards. And he worked a lot with USA Wrestling. He had just an incredible career as a wrestling coach and a person that supports wrestling. But things have changed so much and in society over the last 20 years and how we even operate. And it's amazing how fast things change. I mean, back when my dad was the director, and the chairman for USA Wrestling, it was very, it was more singular in the sense that it was more, the chair would direct more and he would pretty much make the decisions on things that were happening in the organization. And he just kind of led the way. And that was great because he was a great leader. I mean, I don't even know how many times we won nationals under him. I mean, I think we won like 15 times or something like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was one of the guys that originally, came up with the dual concept for dual teams and the junior duels. And I mean, he was so, so amazing how he came up with those ideas. Women's nationals, that was created by my dad, and he created that at OCU. And, before he retired from that, he was, he had won 4 or 5, women's national championships. And, kind of in the early days of women's wrestling, he was a huge pioneer in that. And so it was just amazing to see all those different things he could do. And he did, but he did it a lot as, as a one-man, guy with a bunch of great supporters. Now the shift has been more of a corporate team concept. And so, as the chair now, a lot of what I'm doing is representing our board and our board's ideas, and going back to our board with direction and ideas, and them giving me feedback on how to proceed for our organization. And so, I like that. It takes maybe a little bit more time to get things done, but I think overall, for nowadays, you're getting a better product because you have a group of really great people making decisions for an organization versus a few. And I can tell you that our board is phenomenal, and it's getting better every time. I mean, we've got guys like, Mike Sheets on our board. I mean, Perry on our board, and we've got Coach Serber, the winningest coach in Oklahoma now, after my dad's record on the board. I mean,
Yeah.
Our age group directors, Coach Ruth has won a number of junior national dual championships. We've got, guys like Jerry Kuntz, who's been in USA Wrestling since the inception of it in Oklahoma. And so as a board, when you operate that way and you get input from those folks, it really helps you kind of like make better choices. And so we have to operate that way. Also, I'll be honest, like, with the situations right now with COVID and things of this nature, we have to operate more cautiously.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of times folks, struggle with that, but, with this platforms like this that we're putting forward and developing that people kind of expect, there are a lot of eyes on us. I mean, we have safe sport and COVID restrictions and all these things that we're dealing with now that, quite frankly, they didn't have to deal with those, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think those things are good. I'm glad we have them in place now. I think they're important, but it takes a little bit more, I think, navigating to get those kind of things done for us than it did in the past.
Yeah, you kind of answered the question I was getting ready to ask, was what is your management style? And that kind of, you go through the board. I mean, the board's got to make the decision, then you relay the message, basically. I mean, and you're doing a good job of that. I think we move faster that way, probably too.
Yeah, I tell you, it's and I don't definitely want to, be self-promotive, but it is difficult to, take a group of 16, 17 people in a meeting and move them through, making decisions and to help an organization. And so it's a difficult task. I tell you, my, of course, like all of us, but we're volunteers, but my main job is counseling. And I've done a lot of group therapies, and not that, running a board is like doing group therapy, but it is a process of trying to work, with people and moving and talking, and that I attribute a lot of that, the ability to do that to my experience with that.
Yeah. Well, then let's talk about that. I mean, what are the challenges we're facing now with COVID? Having practices or not having practices. I mean, the parents are biting. They want this. They want their kids practicing. Obviously, I know the kids want it. But we do have to be pretty, I hate to use the word cautious, but we have to understand where we're at, navigating the waters of. So what do you think about, what are your thoughts on that as far as the challenges we're facing and how we move forward?
I mean, it's difficult, because I'm like you, like a lot of people, I wear a lot of different hats. I wear the dad hat because my boys wrestle and are actively wrestling now. I wear the coach's hat because I'm an active coach. I wear the chairman hat. I'm leading of an organization, and so there's lots of things to look at with that for me. I wish sometimes it was simpler and I only had one hat. I could be like, hey, this is what we got to do. And so there's a different answer for every hat I wear, and I think the truth lies in between all those. I mean, when you take it from just a straight parent, aspect, like, let's go, man. Like, let's get wrestling. Like, this is silly. How I feel about, things politically as a parent, I'm like, this shouldn't stop us from being active and doing things. I mean, this is what we need to get going doing. We need to have practice. We need to have tournaments. We need to be going, So that hat's really easy. And I think a lot of people are in that position. Like, yeah, what are we doing? As a coach, my hat starts to change a little bit, and my view changes a little bit. And so, as a coach, there is a sense of caution a little bit, like, as a coach, you're protective of your team, of all the athletes, of all the families. And so there's like, okay, I definitely want to proceed. I want to get going, but we have an obligation to make sure we protect children and athletes. We don't want someone to get hurt. We don't want this to taint, the program that we're in a negative way, or hurt kids, or, discourage kids from participating in wrestling. If one kid gets really sick, or a group of kids get sick, and then parents decide they don't want to, have their kids participating in wrestling, that really stinks.
Yeah.
And, when you put that coach hat on, one thing I think it's important people need to think about is a lot of times these coaches, because I was a high school coach for a couple of years, is that, the decisions you make, you and I, we're wrestlers. I mean, we're like, 110, let's go year round. But, that's not every wrestler. There are a lot of casual wrestlers, kids that just like it, that it's fun for them. And, they're not going to go year round. They play other sports. And so I think sometimes, wrestling people like us that live it, breathe it, sleep it, we also have to take into consideration, like coaches do, that not every kid's like that. And so you kind of have to proceed with caution there. And then when I put the chairman hat on for the COVID situation, it's completely different than the other ones.
Yep.
Because I have an obligation to protect my entire state, and, all my wrestlers, the future of wrestling, so to speak. And, wrestling, as much as I love it, and as much as I think it's an important, to me, it's the best sport in the world for any kid to do. It's also a sport that's a little bit fragile. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It would not take much for people to shut down wrestling programs, and there are some people out there looking for excuses to shut them down. So we definitely don't want to give them any ammunition or power to do that. I mean, before this, with the growth of women's wrestling in our state and other states, and just wrestling was on just this upward trajectory. You know what I mean? So we need to be a little cautious. That being said, as the chairman, I've also taken steps to implement planning in case they do shut down wrestling this year. I just don't think as an organization, or as a state, and I've talked to my board about this, so this is not something that's not representative of our board, but we are not going to let wrestling get stopped this year. We will have a wrestling season. We will definitely have a high school wrestling state championship. I don't know what the nature of that will look like or how it will be, but if the schools, due to having to protect all the children, or the Oklahoma Secondary School Association, under the guise of having to protect all the children, can't do that, then we definitely will step up and help, just intermittently during this year to try to make that available for those athletes, and then gladly, pass that responsibility back to the schools and the Secondary Schools Association, Activities Association, when this goes away. But I think we've kind of have got to take steps to make that happen. Now, I will tell everybody that's going to listen to this, and anybody thinking about this, this concept of me versus us has really got to change, because for us to pull off a state championship and keep wrestling alive outside of the school systems, I don't think people realize how hard that's going to be. It's going to take a lot of organization, a lot of togetherness, a lot of funding. And so, if that is the case here in the next month or two, we're really going to have to reach out and bond together and work together as a group of Oklahomans to protect our sport, protect our wrestlers, but also to help perpetuate our sport forward.
Yeah, and I think we can do that. I really do.
Absolutely.
For the kids, and just for the sport too, in the state, because I know there's going to be states that probably won't. They probably won't have a state title or a championship. It's not. Yeah. Especially some of the ones on the East Coast and probably West Coast. So we're doing something that people may want to model. But through USA Wrestling is awesome. In my mind,
it is. Yeah,
I've been pro USA Wrestling for a long time, and I know you guys have, obviously, you and your dad. But I always tell people, if there's resources to go get, you got to go to the USA Wrestling website, and they have plenty of resources. We're obviously tied to that, and we're upgrading our website as we speak. So, and making it easier for the parents, the kids, the athletes, and the coaches to navigate, know where to get their cards, get resources, that type of thing. And which leads to my next, my next thought or question is, I think the biggest thing we got to do is grow the sport. And I know that's different, obviously, in the COVID time, but growing the membership base, I'm a businessman. I know you are too. So I always look at numbers. I'm looking to increase the numbers as much as we can. What do you think we have to do that? Like, what is that? What are your thoughts on growing the membership? And just because as wrestling people, obviously we're looking at our kids and we're like, okay, what do we got to do to make our kids the best?
Yeah.
Sometimes we lose track of the recruiting initiative and going in, getting brand new kids that their parents may never have wrestled before. And maybe they're scared to, wrestling is intimidating from the standpoint. If you're going to walk into a gym, if I walk into Edmond North's gym and I've never wrestled before, I'm like, these dudes, some tough guys. And how do I even get my kid involved in this when I'm not even close to this level of expertise? So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I hadn't thought about that, but I kind of can tell you what my overall kind of perspective on that is. I mean, I think when you look at the growth of wrestling, I look at it, I guess, less macro and more micro, like what needs to grow wrestling in Oklahoma. I feel like that's kind of what, all the membership has charged me to do. I think the first and the most obvious area to grow wrestling right now is women's wrestling. I am a huge fan of women's wrestling. Obviously, my dad having the first women's wrestling program in the state of Oklahoma, and an incredible one, a national championship level one that won 4 or 5. I think he won 5 in a row. I mean, I got to check his stats because he's got so many, but he won a ton, and I got to help. And I just fell in love with the athletes, during that period. Their passion to compete. Those original women wrestlers were just such pioneer, groundbreaking athletes, and I just have so much respect for them. And I mean, we had our first state championship this year, and it was huge, and those athletes were just giving it their all. And I was really impressed with the level of competition, and we've got some huge advocates of women's wrestling in our state, just working really hard to grow those numbers, to include women in wrestling and get them active, and letting them know that this is an option. That's a huge area. So getting coaches, people, programs, school systems behind supporting women's wrestling programs is vital for women's wrestling and the growth of wrestling. And also that concept of equality. I mean, women should have the equal rights to compete and have the same type of experiences as men in athletics. And so this is a perfect opportunity for us to help, as a group push forward equality in that. I think that's important. So that's got to be the number one area. We got to support that, develop that, and grow that. The second thing I think that is always important, like you said, is getting athletes early and getting them to fall in love with wrestling early. And so one of the other things that, when I was elected, a year ago, the two of the things that were really, said to me by a lot of leaders and even all the way up to the highest leaders in our state was, Zach, you've got to first get, fiscal responsibility as part of our organization. And that's locked down now. I mean, we've taken steps to, really fund that and support that. And the second mission that I was given was, we got to get the youth wrestling back together. And so we have been super active in doing that. We initiated meetings. We've been in meetings all summer to try to combine the youth league programs and make those happen. We put forward some really great ideas. I think that, what I understand is recently were accepted by, one of the organizations. And so, I've got my marching orders from our board, and I'm going to go work to put a plan together to kind of finish that up, because by combining, youth wrestling leagues together, parents are going to get a better product. They're going to get better experience, and there'll be more kids. And so, Oklahoma is a very rural, state. You can't drive probably 45 minutes without seeing a cow or a horse or a farm, in our state. And so, if you live way up in, northwest or southwest or northeast or south, east, Oklahoma, and you have to drive 30, 45 minutes for a wrestling tournament, you want to make sure that all the clubs in that area are part of one group that can put as many kids in those tournaments as you can. So you're not going to a tournament wrestling, 2 kids. And so, putting that back together, I think was essential for the growth of wrestling. I think when we put that back together this year and we start moving in that positive direction, I think that's going to help a lot with our youth. And the next thing that's really important, and I want to speak a little bit to this because I think it's so essential. I think there's really 2 concepts right now kind of floating around, and really the majority of our state is with one, and there are a few that are not. And it's a concept of what's good for your kid is good for my kid, which is good for all kids.
Mm.
We have programs in our state that are open to everybody, and invite everybody in and try to develop everybody and help everybody. And we have a few programs that aren't necessarily thinking that that's the model for productivity for our athletes. And so, for example, your son and my son, they're very close in weight and have wrestled throughout the years, and they're both one up and one down on each other, and that's just how wrestling. That's how you get better as an athlete, And if I go to a practice and your son and my son are there, I'm going to go try to help both of them. I'm going to try to make them both better because, if your son gets better and he's beating my son, that's great because my son's got to get better to beat your son. And that's how you really kind of make things better as you just try to help all the kids, under the right, following the right rules and return to mat guidelines. I went to wrestling rooms where there were, kids from every group and every part of the state working out together. That's awesome. It's much better to be, I think, like that. That will grow our sport. That will make everybody better and tougher. I think when you get little, well, only these special invited kids are going to come to this practice or this thing. I think that kind of hurts not only your kids. I think it hurts our state.
Yeah.
And so, I would strongly encourage people to be, really, broad and inclusive of everybody in their concepts of this. And, when you do that, things get better. And if you look at our good programs, especially like our youth league programs, I can go from top to bottom. You can go up north to Tulsa, you can go to Three Style, and hey, you want to walk in that room, you got awesome coaches.
Yep.
And you want to come down further, you want to stick your head in the room at Stand Fast, you got awesome people in there helping, and so you can go top to bottom anywhere in the state. I guarantee you can go over there to Broken Arrow and go work out, and come over here to Edmond and work out, and we'll open the door, let you in, and we'll work out together, and we'll try to make you better, and you'll try to make us better. And doing that really makes things better for everybody. That will grow the sport, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think what you said, bringing those two organizations together, I mean, back when it was just one organization, I mean, the competitiveness, the state tournaments were, extremely tough. And I think when you bring all that back together, the chemistry, the unity, it's good for the parents too, because some parents didn't get to see what we saw back in the 90s and early 2000s,
Right.
I think it's a good thing if we can bring all that back together, and hopefully it happens. But like you said too, having open doors for kids, our kids get to wrestle people that haven't got a chance to wrestle. I mean, we don't get a chance to wrestle with you guys that often because you're in Oklahoma City, but when we do, you want that opportunity. And again, I think inclusiveness is great, and that competition makes each other better. And so I think we're on that path. We've been on here for a little bit. So is there any closing comments or thoughts that you have? I mean, I want to do this more often, obviously. This is something new. We never have done this as far as an organization, have the chairman on, regularly talking about updates and things that are going on. And then, having RTC coaches, college, and then high school coaches is going to be huge too. So I think we can create a lot of content and get a lot of activity that's going to be good for everybody in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I would just say, you're I think you're a perfect example of the direction our state needs to take. We talk about, USA Wrestling being a group of people working together and a board of people working together and bringing in good people. I mean, you're a perfect example of that. I mean, this is your arena. I mean, this is what you do for a living. And to have you come in and help our organization and change how we, produce marketing and social media and helping, athletes and families with opportunities like this and changing our website. I mean, that's the thing we just got to keep doing. And so I really respect and appreciate you doing this. I mean,
thank you.
Again, we're all volunteers. None of us get paid. And so this is, time out of our work and time away from our families. And so I really appreciate you doing this, Josh. I think you're awesome. And I'm so proud to, be a part of a group of people like you and all the folks in USA Wrestling and USA Oklahoma Wrestling that, are just trying to make things better. I think just keep working together and being positive is how we're going to get there. And man, I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on. And guys, if you're watching this, again, you can subscribe to our social media. We have it scrolling down at the very bottom here, our Facebook and our Twitter. Instagram. I didn't put YouTube on, but it is official OKUSA Wrestling. We plan on doing this quite often, having more, live post, because I think people like that kind of thing. And so, Zach, thanks for coming on, and I'll give you guys an update. We'll be doing this soon again.
Thanks, guys. All right. See you soon.